to this evening's Facebook Live. We have, I'm delighted to say, Paul Ledger from the Bosworth Clinic, who's going to be talking to us today about all things strength and conditioning, injury management, strength and conditioning, linking the whole things up as well. And we've also got a reasonably well-behaved black Labrador in the front as well, which hopefully will make as little noise as possible, but already is proving to be a little bit difficult. Paul, if you wouldn't mind just kicking us off, just sort of explaining a little bit about the background that you come from, and how you came into being sports and strength and conditioning, and some of the work you've done now.
Okay, sure. So, believe it or not, I used to train horses. I rode at quite a competitive level, and decided to take a break from horses. Competed in also martial arts. So I was always into the fitness element of training and competing, and the pressures of competing at top level. I then took a break from my sporting activities and went into close protection and travelled around the world protecting people as a bodyguard. And whilst working in that career, I came across a lot of private masseurs, trainers, physios, and thought, do you know what, that's for me. So I then came back to the UK, wanted to go back into horses, looked at a possibility going down the road of personal training, performance coaching, sports therapy, and sadly I didn't get back into horses or apply it to horses as much as I'd like to, because I just got so busy with humans. I was very fortunate enough from the get-go, within the first sort of 8 months, I worked alongside Gordon Bosworth, and he's been my mentor on and off for, I'd say, 22 years now. We've been doing this. So we've done stuff together. I've worked in elite sports alongside him and off on my own little projects. And Gordon was given the opportunity to open the Bosworth Clinic and asked me if I would like to join the team. So that's where I am.
Very cool. So what do we talk a little bit about your experiences in elite sport, just because I'm sure people find that quite interesting, and also as much as I'm sure coaches will relate athletes to horses and animals at times, I think the athletes might find it interesting to, well, maybe we'll explore that one as well, but let's talk about elite sport, what we do in elite sport.
So elite sport, I was working with, again, for Gordon. He was in charge of the men's British bobsleigh team. So I worked alongside the girls 2001 World Cup team, and then was given the opportunity to work with the guys and go to the Salt Lake Olympics alongside Gordon as a soft tissue therapist. I've worked with yourself and other Ironmen, triathletes over the years, track and field. I've headed up and developed a high performance scheme for Oxford University, which covers 52 teams and about 1,400 athletes. Obviously I don't manage all of those. I've had groups of girls and guys under me who I've mentored, upskilled, developed, to basically bring what we do at the Bosworth, or what I've done over the years, to Oxford University, as well as working in rugby, football.
So pretty much every sport you find. And so, how would you obviously you've done massage therapy, and you're also very much involved in the strength and conditioning side of things. A lot of people might sit there thinking there is no real correlation between those two, and other people will sit there going, oh yeah, I can see how that works. I mean, how would you describe those two quite different, I suppose, expertises, and how you manage to bring them together into what you do?
I think the way S&C or performance should go is by having some knowledge or experience with things like massage therapy. And the main reason is basically you're getting your hands dirty. So we all talk about exercises, we talk about lifts, whether it be Olympic lifting, whether it be kettlebell this, or just using training bands, or just doing your technical run, swim, cycle. But I think to truly understand the body and how people move and where the compensations are, through my experience, and this is a flaw that I do see and I feel quite strongly about, in the word S&C. I think more S&C people need to put their hands on bodies and actually feel tissue, feel how it's working, prep the body to then go and do good lifts and good loading, everything else. I think the UK is slightly behind. If I'm honest, you go to the States, you'll have one person doing all four things really, really well. And I think that's where I would like to see the industry and other coaches or S&C trainers develop their skills.
So when you say hands on the body, what do you feel it really adds to when you can feel the tissue compared to when you're
so for me,
just telling someone to yeah.
So for me personally, I like to feel, so I use my eyes. First off, I get a visual, so I look at people, look at their move, look at them, look at their bulk and tone, and then I put my hands on. So I feel for multiple things. Within a split second, I would put my hand on. Sometimes I'll move my hand across the tissue, and then I'll repeat the same process, but I'll shut my eyes. So I start to see, and it sounds a bit holistic, with my hands. No different to a surgeon, so you can train your palpation skills. And one of my strengths, and I'm sure Gordon would back me up on this, is palpation skills. I think you need to know what you're touching, and one of the key things I'm looking for is tone. And I classify tone in two forms, and that's a negative or a positive tone. So obviously, if you've got good flexibility, your strength is going through the roof, your power output is going through the roof, you're doing really, really well, and you've had no injuries, then obviously that tone's meant to be there. If you've got tone at the beginning of an off season, shall we say, and your flexibility is struggling, and you have a few other musculoskeletal issues, niggles, everything else, then that is a negative tone. So I'm always looking for tone, firing patterns, range of motion, drag, heat. Within a split second, that's all being fed back from my hands.
So it's a lot more than just
finding.
So let's talk about tone a bit more, because there's a lot of research out there about how people hold stress in their system as well. And I know when we've been working together, we've definitely touched on that a few times. As not just an athlete, but also when working as a coach. A lot of the intuition that you have through hands and massage therapy then comes out and say, you give out some really good bits of nuggets of information without the athlete having ever transmitted any conversation to you about how they're feeling.
Yeah, I think that comes with the experience, and certainly working alongside Gordon over the years. You're with him and his own system, you pick up what you want to pick up, like a tool bag, and then you do things with that. And for me, I've looked at, if we turn tone into load, because at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to enhance, manage and use in sport, is just load. I think load input or negative tone isn't just a physical thing. So you're right, you're looking at emotional, psychological stress, lack of sleep. There's been a number of occasions where people have come in where emotional load can become a physical pain. So as a massage therapist, would it be right for me to inflict massage, which is also load, and onto somebody that's already overloaded? And many times people have got problems with their shoulders or necks, they can't turn their head. You start talking to them, understand who's sat in front of you, and just through communication, chances are they're going to burst into tears, so make sure you've got the tissues ready. And at the end of the conversation, a cup of tea and everything else, all of a sudden they turn their head. And the tone's gone because they've spoken, they've offloaded the emotion, and then you say, right, come back in 4 or 5 days, and now we'll work on the soft tissue, the physical aspect. But unless you address these things, the body will stall, and that's why nutrition and psychs have a massive part to play.
And psychs obviously being a psychologist or
absolutely.
And I think we sort of joked about it earlier, that that's where a lot of the stuff that you do with horses, I think, does actually come out, because of course horses can't sit down and have a cup of tea and talk to you about how things are going. So you have to pick those things up through tone, how their emotions are, how they're moving, how they're behaving, and it's behaviour which you're reading.
I mean, you can read the body, with your eyes. I can look at people the way walk into the room or walk into the gym, I know from the get-go what sort of day you're having. Then I use a flag system as to know when to refer on. But the same with horses. You look at horses, you look at body language. Now I've worked with horses for many, many years. Call it horse whispering or whatever the terminology. But yeah, the difference is, day to day I get sworn at quite heavily because of the discomfort I inflict in a good way. I don't take it personally, whereas horses will either bite me or kick me if I get
hit that person.
I'm a big lad.
Yeah, true. I'm pretty close to the camera as well, so actually I look pretty small now, which is quite good. So I guess going into away from that kind of field side of things, I mean, I can say that I've definitely been in tears, but that wasn't anything to do with emotional conversation. That was just and a lot of times people will think the massage, especially athletes, I think massage is all about trying to get in there and hurt points and trigger points and try and hurt it. Obviously, perspective's not on your side this time. You're actually quite a slight individual. There's barely nothing to you, but they'll see you think massage therapy. They think that's going to be all about pain, and actually it's not. No,
not at all. And again, I think that whole thing needs changing because again, I can walk out of my treatment room at the Boston Clinic and suddenly look around and the waiting room's empty because they either heard the screams coming from the room or they clocked one look at me as I come through and I squeeze through the doorway and go, oh my god, this man mountain is going to pull my limbs off, and it isn't about that. It's about, like I said at the beginning, reading the body, understanding the person, and actually being more specific. I think generalised massage, sports massage, deep tissue is okay, but I think with the level of sport, I think the way the sport should go, I think we need to up our game and be more specific to what we're actually feeling. Sometimes we need to back off, sometimes we need to go really, really hard and talk to the patient and say, look, this isn't going to be nice. Remember, it's all about me, not you, so that's okay. Have a bit of fun, but at the same time, there is a serious note to this. And I think if you explain to people the whys, why is it going to hurt, why am I doing this, and the potential outcome, all of a sudden they forget the pain. And the minute they feel good function and good load and the body coming alive and more energy, it's long forgotten.
But at the end of the day as well, these points of pain, they're actually communications from the body in its own right as well. So it's not, you have done this to yourself, is I think a phrase which I've heard a few times. But your body has done it to you, and so the reason that you have, say, tight points or movement patterns which aren't quite firing in the right order, those are happening for some other reason. You're trying to understand why that compensation is sticking in.
And that's it.
Bringing in strength and conditioning and kind of some important things and lessons we can learn from that as well.
Yeah, I also believe things like massage, the strength within massage is the first thing, putting your hands on somebody. Because by putting your hands on, and I think it's strength, you can use it in acute trauma or for treatment, but I think its strength is in prevention. So I would rather see and work with people that are not broken and using it as a tool to take them through their sort of journey of performance. Because the minute I put my hands on, and I understand we classify it as the system, Gordon, we use the word system a lot, which is the body and as a whole, we start to feel things brewing up. So if we can feel it and catch it before it escalates into something, guess what?
The conversation or the phrase I use with my athletes when we're looking at that is an MOT. You can't have an MOT to stop it from breaking down as opposed to break it down and trying to fix it. And
exactly.
Hopefully it's a cheaper way of doing it. But definitely with athletes, we're looking at that in terms of with athletes that are working with them on a day-to-day basis. If they're in seeing either massage therapy or physio, so one is seeing physio and injured, but actually if you're working with the likes of Gordon or Sharon and the people at the Boston Clinic, it very much is preventative.
Absolutely. I think that's a new thing because most therapists, medical professionals will be looking at you and treating you because you're in pain or because you can't do this or because you have a symptom. But I think where people struggle is treating people purely with no pain. It goes against their thought process. medicine or however what they apply, and actually just using their skill base. And sometimes we do the same things just because they're out of pain, and it's about looking for dysfunction and performance. So again, I think that's a new thing.
Well, from a coaching point of view, you're looking at someone who's not in pain, say swimming, and you're looking at how they move, and you're trying to make them move better. And in many ways, that's sort of where you're coming at it from a non-pain therapy related bit of massage or physio. It's how is somebody moving and why they're moving in that way, and can we improve their movement patterns so they become more efficient?
Exactly.
Which I suppose brings some nice segues to strength and conditioning, and how
Absolutely.
and how maybe you talk a bit about now how you work with strength and conditioning in terms of what your process is. And
So if I start off, having pain, or I'll just go back a second, being in pain or having niggles, eventually you're going to break somewhere, which is no good to you as a coach and no good to me. So that's where what we just spoke about really comes into zone. For me, it's prevention, it's catching things before. How do I work in strength and condition? I simplify things. I think there's some great stuff out there, some great practitioners, coaches, trainers, whatever you want to classify them as. I think that there's too much sort of trendy, fun, technical stuff out there. I think people are missing the basics. So what I do, my strength would be looking at testing. So we're looking at musculoskeletal testing, functional testing, and then taking that information and building a very specific program. Obviously taking medical history. And doing the basics. So I would always start post-testing, look at dates, so understand where their A race is, B race is, look at the calendar. People also think, why? Because we have to work backwards. If we want to get there forwards and hit those markers, we have to look at time scale and everything else. Or as performance coaches, we say, no, that's not realistic, and we need a bit more time. Hence, then we would advise coaches to plan their thing. So I would then, once I've got the information, I would put them through what I call a first phase foundation, and I would break that down into A, B or C. So the first one would be looking at like building a house. So you would build a house on foundations like this. We would make sure skeletally that you're sound. So you're probably going to see Gordon or somebody or myself, and we would make sure you're sound, your core, your linear core is doing what it's supposed to do, because we all talk about core. It doesn't just exist here, it's a global thing. And then we also start to look at flexibility, compensations, looking at weakness, firing patterns. Once we've got them, because what we're trying to do, if we go into phase 2, that comes into a strength phase. But if we can't do the foundation and we can't deal with the basic load, how are we going to put weight through? And that's where you get broken. So first phase foundation A, core, the basics, timing, soft tissue work. Then we'll go into first phase B, which will be rotational control, and sort of body weight movement, so stability as well, controls, looking at BOSO work, anything to an unbalance basically, to challenge the nervous system. And once we're happy with that, and things are sort of coming together, you're not so much Bambi on ice, then that's a green light to go. Let's put some load into you. So then we would go into a strength phase, phase 2. I would normally put a hypertrophy phase in there, which is just to build some tissue. And also it's a good way without massive load to teach you how to lift, because there's so many people out there who are very experienced in the gym. Some people are petrified of the gym, and load comes in many forms. As I said, it doesn't have to be Olympic lifting, it could be dumbbells, kettlebells, training bands, body weight. Anything's better than nothing. But then off of that, I would work through eccentric system, isometric, and then hitting all three actually, eccentric, isometric and concentric loading, and then put you into phase 3, which is a power conversion. So, which is the fun bit, the high explosive stuff. A lot of endurance athletes hate, in my experience, or they're a bit nervous of the strength aspect. I think their biggest fear is becoming too big. Certainly when they look at me, but strength isn't in size.
No.
That's
So
what I say.
let's just pick up a couple of quick terminologies.
Yep.
Hypertrophy, how would you describe that to someone?
So hypertrophy.
Yeah.
Okay, so hypertrophy would be the classic sort of bodybuilding program. Not that you're going to become a bodybuilder, but basically you're looking at a sort of medium to light heavy weight. We could work in percentages off the 1 rep max, but to simplify it, medium to sort of light heavy weight. Anything you could do, rep range of sort of 10 to 12, maybe 15 reps. And again, because the load isn't massive, we can focus on, from a safety point of view as well, how people move. You're just building some tissue globally, looking all over, prepping the body really to then go, right, now we're going to put you through a pure strength of, you could be looking at 98% of 1 rep max and hitting 3, 4, maybe maximum 6 reps, which is a totally different ball game. 10, 12, 15 reps.
Definitely. I mean, I think picking up that point you said where athletes tend not to like it, especially endurance athletes, like, oh, I might get big, and they really want to get, really get muscularly big. And of course, as a coach, you should sit there going, fine, but you need to be able to carry load. When you're running, it can be anything from like 3 to 12 times your body weight when you're running. That's one leg. So you're probably not going to lift that amount of weight in the gym, but clearly your body has to be able to work with that at some point. So it's not about getting big, it's about getting strong, and the two are different. And again, female athletes can get a bit upset about the idea of doing big gym weights again, because they think they're going to become quite bulky, and again, they just don't have the testosterone to generate that amount of bulk, which guys do.
I think there's you're right about females, and I think for them, as soon as they actually feel the goods, whether they're on the bike or put it in a run, and they go, oh my god, I feel amazing, and I'm smashing this, and my body weight ratio, my power is huge. Then they, if anything, they get addicted to the strength side. But you're right. If we simplify the training and simplify what is it we're actually trying to do, and it is manage load. So again, you're no good to anyone broken, and most people just do not load enough. I think it's getting better. There's a time and a place also to deal with the S&C load, the strength. Let's call it strength because you as coaches will be doing the conditioning aspect. So we classify that as a strength. That's more or less our thing. And there's a time where that takes priority. I call that a training scale. So, like I said, the scales, off-season, your gym base is up here. That's the one that you're spending most time in. Your technical, your run swim cycle, which is horrible. Runners hate hearing me say this, but you've got to back off from the running, spend the time in the gym or understanding and getting load in. And guess what? It's not forever. Then the scales start to do this. Then before you know it, you're flying in all 3 disciplines. Your gym stuff takes not a back seat, but it drops off. And then as we get you to your first race or peaking strategies or whatever it may be, we then look at maintenance. And I think maintenance is missed quite a lot. I think people feel good. The problem with that is the more you race, your fitness increases. Now, if your fitness increases, your race fitness increases, your conditioning increases, then you stop your S&C, your strength bit. So if you're here and every time you race you start to do this, if your gym stuff stops, you start to build this gap, and that there is risk of injury percentage. So just slot a maintenance program in and go with it.
I think it's really worth going back over as well, because a lot of athletes, as you say, they start racing and they need to recover from it, and they kind of don't really feel like doing strength work, or they feel like they need to be back going. You've got a time trial maybe midweek, you've got 5K running on the weekend, you've got this big block of training coming in. But as you say, if you're not loading properly as you're checking,
you want to do it manually.
No, exactly.
I think there's another thing there that gets missed, and it is difficult. What you've just said is really difficult. That's the exciting bit for myself, is actually looking at the person and trying to manage them or build a relationship with the coach and look at their life. Because some people are pro, some are semi-pro, some are just weekend warriors that love to do what they do, but they have families, they have jobs and everything else. So how do you fit that in? And it is difficult. It might be, if you can't fit a sort of non-consecutive day off, then you're looking at how many hours between each loading aspect. But one thing I think that a lot of people really miss, and in my eyes, performance is based around this, is recovery. So without recovery, we're nothing. we have no time to adapt, we can't lift any better, we're only as good as our last training session or race. Therefore, I think to master your recovery, if you can't get to the gym, it will give you a helping hand or step up for sure.
Well, I think I suppose a couple of things straight to that one. The first one, that kind of point on being able to use that maintenance phase through the training schedule. In many instances of athletes who we've got working on at the moment, it's generally about can you move well. It's not necessarily heavy load stuff. There might be some heavy load things. There might be a few plyometric exercises and strength and conditioning things, but it's more about are you able to feel like you were last week, and if you're not, it's an immediate red flag to say something's not kind of firing properly. So again, it's about early warning systems rather than kind of going through the motions or anything. And I definitely think that maintenance thing is also kind of an opportunity to check the system.
Absolutely, you're constantly, again, hands-on. You're constantly understanding who that athlete is, and you're retesting. If there's a big enough gap, then obviously you can recycle things. But if you can be strong, but if you can't move with it and allow it to become a dynamic experience, then it's game over. You're just moving like a piece of board, and that in itself will drain you. So the body does need to move. The fascia needs to be. So a lot of people understand the muscular system, but not actually the connective tissue aspect. And fascia really needs to be understood and respected. By all means, go lift and get stronger, but work on your flexibility, work on your fascia release, which is another, I think, a little hurdle where everybody loves a hard ball, they love a foam roller, and again, if you've had a hard lactate session or post-race, your legs are feeling tired the next day, your DOMs are screaming, then by all means get on a roller and flush that out. It's no different to me sticking my forearm through. What I would do a lot of is start to use what we call ARTs, active release, so moving limbs, because muscles don't just sit there static as we roll. The fascial interface is muscles not only need to contract, they need to glide, and that's what we're trying to do, is reinstall that gliding mechanism. But I think, with going back to the foam roller or the fascial stuff, I think what a lot of people need to do is think more about the why. Why am I rolling, and why is it constantly tight? If it isn't based on an overload from comp, you'll see people going up and down, and you speak to them, and still painful. Range movement improved? No. Why are you doing it? Oh, because he's doing it, they're doing it, the coach has said, YouTube said. And what I'm saying by asking the why, well, if things are tight, we go back to tone, think about weakness. So if we're trying to change the environment by rolling and releasing, well, look at the opposing muscle. So release something, fire it up, you change the pattern, you change the environment, guess what? The body might just let go. But actually, it's hanging in there to protect you and keep you going.
So in many instances, that tightness athletes are feeling, and then jump on the foam roller, the golf ball, the hockey ball, whatever it might be, or the massage therapist is jumping in, going, right, let's get the elbow into VMO, because it's particularly tight in there. Actually, it's tight for a reason. And I remember I was working with one of our racing athletes, and she was just coming back, having just given birth to her first child, and in this instance, it was the physio, so Sharon was having a look at how she was moving and everything. And the adductors were really tight, and that's because they were the only thing left which was able to hold structurally how she was moving. Now that's an extreme end of of movement, if you like, because she was untrained and trying to get back into training. But at the same time, Sharon's decision was not to dive in there and start loosening things off, because immediately we're going to then have a situation where there's instability and things are going to start having issues elsewhere. So it's about understanding why things are tight.
Don't go rushing in. Just put your hands on, and tightness, like I just said, it could be there to be supporting you, like a guide rope. Don't go cut the guide ropes or your bungee cord. Guess what? It's going to hurt. So, but again, the thing is, you're trying to immerse, you're trying to change, make the change. Don't do the same as everybody else. Have a go. Look at the weakness, and again, you're looking at things like fire. The biggest one is hip flexor tightness, and weak glutes. So we see it a lot in running. It's probably one of the biggest things that I spend my time with. That and feet, I would say now. In fact, I'd say those two are overtaking backs. Feet and
hip flexors,
weak glutes. And when I mean weak glutes, I should change that to misfiring patterns.
Right. So this was about firing patterns then. What's the average?
So I
athlete. Okay. Well, what's the firing pattern?
Well, let me just explain the weakness and because you can't have both.
Yeah.
But I had a powerlifter who could sort of deadlift, nearly 300 kg. I would, he wasn't tall, big boy, huge legs, big bum, big glutes. Get him on the bed, and obviously he's got his figures down on paper. That's what he does. There are his PBs. He's won comps, but on my bed, I can literally push his legs down, or those big old legs with my little finger.
So he's trying to lift his legs
So
up.
So things like that, and you look at talk about backs. Yeah, so you've got to say, well, okay, you're hitting those numbers, but how are you hitting those numbers? So then we look at patterns, and the body has a responsibility to fire in a sequence to enable function. So the key one everyone would have heard about is glute firing patterns. So we're looking at, for instance, we take your right glute. So we're looking for your glute to fire, your hamstring to fire, and then bilaterally flick over to your left extensor, QL area. And what we would see is an overactive back. So on the left side, we become prone and it fire first, or the hamstring will come in and then the glute just goes blip. So you have to get those firing patterns on. If I change that or explain that in a different way, if we talk about load or power units, and I said to you, right, here's 5 power units, okay? I'm going to put 2 in your hamstrings and 2 in your glutes and 1 into your back. Or actually, let's put 3 into your glutes and 2 into your hamstrings, whatever. We're going to split the power units. So when we hit dysfunction and misfiring, it just passes the load, the power unit's over. So the glute goes off. So 1 unit's going to go to the back. So there you've got 2 units going through the back extensors, hence why you get that back and dysfunction. And then the hamstrings get overloaded even more, hence why we get all sorts of sciatic stuff, we get hamstring pulls, we get weakness, we get all sorts. Well, the hamstrings take everything. Yeah. And that's purely just all you've got to do is spread that workload. Yeah. And we educate the body to fire.
In the right order.
In the right order. That we classify that as disassociation training. So again, going into extension of the hip, people have sort of lost the thought process or the understanding of how that extension is happening. So we'll just wang the leg around and flick it back. But again, if you look at people when they're doing it on the bed, they're rotating through their pelvis to get extension. The hamstring is coming up way before the glutes, so it's moving as one big mass. And what we're trying to do is actually say, right, can you isolate and control your pelvis through your core, where you want to use the terminology, core, then can you fire the glute, we educate the glute to fire, because by flinging momentum and get the hamstrings to lift the leg up, the glute just hides away, swept under the carpet. So we literally, I'll put my finger in and say, right, can you fire my finger out of your bottom, basically? Yes, out it comes, the glute's starting to activate, and then we say, right, now function, which means you're going to lift the leg. If you want to take the hamstring out, we'll bend the knee. So, and what that does, people go, oh my God, that's really, really hard. That's not a funky, new exciting exercise, it's just basic hip extension. Yeah. Which we kind of need.
Well, there's traffic runners, come on.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah, exactly. So it's drive, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So you need to be able to re-educate and re-disassociate what your body should be doing.
And I guess that's where if you go back to your kind of process through where you've got your stability phase, if you like, then you've got your hypertrophy phase. Yeah. That first bit of stability comes in, and if you can't stabilise, I know you said this to me before, both when working as an athlete and as a coach, is how are you able to run 10 kilometres or a marathon when you can't even stand on one leg, which is a really fundamental part of running. Landing, which is a lot more load, stabilising, and then firing back off again. Yeah. And if you can't be stable on one leg,
you can't build strength.
Yeah, no. And so that's where the firing patterns come in again.
Yeah, compensation.
Yeah.
Even with compensation, you don't always have pain. So you can go through a season, years competing, and you'll get by through 2 things. One is talent and one is compensation. They will eventually both run out, and then you'll have multiple symptoms and pain patterns all over the body. You'll come and see a physio. You'll think you're having a rough ride of everything, but actually, you need some structure. You need to address why you're compensating, and then pick up the reins again. You go back to that talent.
And I think with triathletes, it's a really important area because they're running off the bike usually. So we're talking about tight hip flexors, underusing the glutes, and it's very easy for them to get quite effective at cycling and then running off the bike in that way. But actually, they're just compensating the way they could be running. I know we've done it with a couple of athletes, Elaine being one of them, and we've lodged that on our blog. How we really worked with her. We took some time with yourself, with Gordon, with the training stuff, with Sharon as well. We really re-educated her whole running system, and she ran like a different athlete. Yes, she was a good athlete before. She qualified for Kona twice, but suddenly we're in a position where her run was her absolute strength, and before she could have that consistent muscular feeling. She knew that she could run whatever the pace was, 3:40 I think it was, off the bike every single time, and suddenly she was looking at 3:15s and 3:20s, and that was suddenly a lot more effective as an athlete.
And I think, going back to Elaine, everyone's individual. People say to me, well, are you sure I'm compensating? Are you sure I'm not firing because I've qualified for Kona twice in a run, I've won this, I've won that? And it's like, that's, don't take it as a negative thing. What we're talking about is like working on an F1 car. A Formula 1 car goes out the pits, it'll be tested, they do testing before they actually go out. And then the information comes back, you'll have a team behind the scenes working to get the best out of that car. The driver will have, trainers as well working on him physically, sports sites, everything else. So eventually it all comes together. What we're saying, what I'm saying is, okay, I hear what you're saying, and that's an amazing achievement. But let's catch this before it escalates into something. And also, if you've done that, and you've qualified, but wouldn't you like to be on the podium?
Okay.
So where do we want to be? Do we want to? Is it about just qualifying and going, and then there's nothing wrong with that? Or do we want to go, I want to PB every time I go to Kona? Or do I want to first, second, or third?
Yeah. And
you're talking efficiency. That's what we do. That's what we're trying to change. Is looking at you and enabling you to become efficient as an athlete. And strength, or the S and C word, should install that efficiency.
And I think the interesting, should we say, issue that we as therapists or experts in those areas which we have is when do you make that change as well? Because a lot of times the athlete may not want to, they're happy they've qualified for Kona, or they're happy they've just done the first run, they're just on 5k, they're pretty happy with all of that. So how do you then change mindset? So what do you want to get better? And I think one of the conversations I have quite often with definitely some of the older athletes as they're moving on, so well, actually we're at a point now where your compensation mechanism, we're talking about it in a performance manner, and performance is about maybe medaling or doing UTV or doing some really cool, exciting, and there's some great events out there, crazy ideas and crazy events out there. But as you get a bit older as well, it's not just about performance, it's about a new performance, which is movement for life, bending over, being able to put your socks on, and things like that. Sitting up from the bed are some really important things which if you compensated, especially through sport, which is more repetitions. It's about moving better to last in function longer, not just in performance.
Exactly. You're right. Efficiency can cover everything. And one of the, I see it a lot where I'd say the minute you hit sort of late 30s going into 40s and beyond, certainly triathlon, Ironman, you say to people, okay, how long are you doing it? Okay, I've been doing it 3 or 4 years. Okay, and your age is such and such, and I'm 50, I'm 45. And they say it with such a negative sort of tone, and I'm like, okay, that's a number, okay, and you've done this and you've done that, and I've pinged up all this misfiring and all this tightness and all your pelvis is doing this and all this sort of negative jargon to you. But what I do is flip that into a positive really, really quickly, and you have to. And that's not in just a vocal thing, that's my body language, I even grow bigger, I might even give you a smack on the back, or because when we talk about efficiency and doing or enter into a form of smart training, if you're saying I'm 40 and I'm over the hill, well, take 5-8 years off that. So, you're only 35 in a way. Therefore, it opens other doors to personal PBs, personal achievements. So, if you train smartly and have a good team around you, coaches, support network, whether you're pro, semi-pro, again, weekend warriors, it doesn't really matter. That efficiency and that sort of experience can go through the roof. It is purely just a number. And I see a lot of it.
So let's talk a bit about the team as well, because we've worked together as an athlete. I mean, you looked after us doing cross country back in school days, and my brothers as well from our own point of view. But obviously, more recently, we've worked in what we've called, or Gordon labelled it as the integrated support team, and the IST, and we had the race team athletes. We had them doing a whole range of different things, from having a physio checkup multiple times through the year, working with yourself through the program, psychologists, and also nutrition as well with the coach. And this is an area, that kind of integrated support network, which you've been working in, I guess, since your days in the Olympic.
For me personally, it was quite a new thing. Obviously, talking to Gordon, I think Gordon came across almost frustrated by when he worked for Team Canada. I think it was speed skating. Don't quote me on that, it might be wrong, but I think it was definitely in Canada. He was getting frustrated with people having meetings just for the sake of having meetings, and most of the time, a lot of the support team were talking about themselves instead of the athletes, clock watching and everything else. So he developed the IST as a means of how do we get the information without any what's the word I'm looking for? Fluff. Yeah, fluff basically. So yeah, the IST came about, and I remember using it. I remember the first time in Portugal, and we'd spoken about it. I understood the concept. I'd used it once, I think, before, but not on a scale, and certainly not with endurance athletes, and also not with a mixed bunch of personalities. And we had some big personalities, and that is, I just took it to another level. It's quite a fascinating and very important tool. And actually, I've tweaked it slightly, because the IST is what Gordon developed. But the concept, and for me, what it highlighted were flags in areas, because we all, like myself, taking care of the fitness aspect, the strength aspect. Then we've got Helen Money, the sports nutritionist, and we've got Mark Bellamy doing the sports cycling, Gordon working alongside Sharon doing the physio aspect. And the good thing is, like you were saying, we all had our time, so we had this sort of, 20 minute, half an hour sort of debriefing, and just
each athlete,
and each athlete, it was a very private thing, you then, we would make notes. We had, it was all based off them. They got the full attention. We didn't share the notes with anyone. We didn't talk about it. It was there. It was raw. It was on the paper. We didn't even reprocess that. We just took the information down for the next day, where we had the IST meeting. And the IST meeting the next day was very structured. I think we had 4 minutes, 5 minutes
per person,
per athlete to talk individually. So instead of, if you imagine big characters, people that like to talk, or speaking and talking about this athlete, it just doesn't work. Because also what it does is, I think, installs in other meetings, a subconscious thought process. And you don't get the true reflection, and you certainly don't see the flags flying. So for me, I remember the first one pinging up, and you do your talk, and then you listen to somebody else, and all of a sudden it's like, makes sense, why, I've got this, and then somebody else, but you can't shout it out until we get to the end, and then we have a debrief about the individual, and then we put things into a strategy, and refer them to whichever channel they need to go to. It could be Mark, Helen, myself, or physio Gordon. That for me, that was the strength. But again, sometimes we have these meetings, and to highlight flags. Sometimes it doesn't always go that well. Sometimes we have to read what's in front of us and sort of look globally as to where we want to go forwards in their performance or their career, but also where they come from. And you have to, you have to be delicate and understanding with certain people. And with that, certainly with my experience on a number of occasions, and I've used it a lot, certainly with Oxford, and also the support team. I've called things short because things need to be addressed sooner, or they need more support somewhere else. So IST is a very strong tool.
I think with some of the, we even now that we don't have such a formal process anymore with the athletes. Obviously, we're all working now with different athletes, but as a coach, I know I have athletes working with nutritionists and I have athletes working with psychologists, and yourself and strength and conditioning, and also the physios as well as the clinic. But I'm always talking to them, and if I know that they're seeing, say, a nutritionist and also yourself, I make sure that we're all talking, because I think that's a really important learning point as a coach anyway, that actually the athlete needs to be seen from different angles by all the people involved in that planning process. And as a coach, you don't get the full information unless you have all those different angles. And I think for the athletes out there listening, it's something which they can certainly take away, is if they are seeing a physio and seeing or strength and conditioning coach, and they are also having coaching elsewhere, they need to involve that coach with the therapist, whoever that might be, because otherwise the coach has got a plan, the therapist has got a plan, the strength and conditioning coach has got a plan, and none of those plans are aligned, and the only person who's going to get into trouble is the athlete, but the athlete will then push that back against all those different areas and say none of this is working, when actually it just requires a quick phone call between 3 people, and it could be the best plan for you ever.
I think that's really important what you just said there, Phil. And again, it's something I learned from Gordon, was, through his experience of many Olympics and head of this and head of that, obviously you've got the athlete and the coach, and can only be one chief. If you have multiple practitioners, specialists in their own field, all trying to do something at the same time, you're right, the person that's going to suffer is the athlete. So it's very important, but at the same time, it's very important to know, and this is where the flag sort of system comes in, where you are the lead on that. So they may have gone through their physio, and now they need to be doing, getting stronger. So it's like, okay, this is your project now. You do this, and then through that, you think, okay, I've got to a point that it's not where I want them to be, through conversation, understanding them from professional and their character. Okay, we need to go and have a chat with a sports psych, or look at the nutrition or sleep patterns and that sort of thing. And it's all about referral, but it always comes back to, and always must come back to, coaches and chiefs, or the coach and the athlete sit at the top, and we submit and talk to the coach, and we support the coach. Otherwise, I think what you end up getting is all your support network become chiefs and celebrities in their own right, and in sport that shouldn't really happen. It's all about the athlete.
Yeah, well, the athlete's performance is the only thing which everyone's measured by at the end of the day.
Exactly.
We use our jobs to perform, technically. I think the changing the tack completely. A common question I get as an athlete, as a coach with athletes, is you start talking to them about things like strength and conditioning. And first of all, it's usually kind of a new experience. And there was one lady out in our training camp with us, and she had no idea that strength and conditioning was even a thing, and there was a strength and conditioning coach. And she did some amazing long distance triathlons and did really, really well at them. But she didn't know about that existence. And so how can you convert someone who's doing really well swim, bike and run, but they aren't actually putting in that support for them through the S&C? What point does that become important?
That's a tricky question to answer. I would say slowly and delicately, and not overface them. I think, like I said, the word strength and conditioning, you mention that to most people, if they Google it, you see a lot of people lifting and flipping tires and doing all sorts of stuff. Or they'll go down the road of, they might get confused with a bit of CrossFit, which can be quite overfacing. So I think, just sitting down and I think you've got to also, whilst you're trying to not sell this concept of trying to get them better, I think you need to acknowledge and push how well they've done without it. So they feel part of this, you know, where they've been, and with that they don't feel like a spare part, you know, and going into strength and conditioning is a new thing, and for some people it can be quite daunting. So I think, you know, be really, really delicate, take your time, explain, you know, the whys and the benefits. Sadly, sometimes that doesn't always work, and the decisions made because they're broken. Which, you know, it's kind of, I don't really want to say I told you so, but
It's going to happen.
it's going to happen. And also, you know, when there's a big cost involved, it's like, you know, if you've got a budget and this is your thing, spend your money wisely. You know, look at the prevention, look at this, look at that, and enjoy what you do. Education. You know, I'm a big believer on education. You know, we've worked a lot alongside. You know, education. That is the key thing. Is educate them. Don't scare them. Educate them. Remember, load comes in many shapes and sizes. Then you have to be in a gym, you can be at home, in your garage, in your garden. It could be something's better than nothing.
I guess with those kind of the two things from that. First is with that, kind of, at what point is the right point? Is if you've got the person training in triathlons going up and up and up and up, at some point that gap between the strength and conditioning is going to be so great that there will be some sort of injury or something will come along, and then they'll go down and they have to start building the support up. They've gone so far up, if you like, without any scaffolding, and they need to put the scaffolding in place to go higher. So that gap will be, I suppose, the first point we say, right, now let's do a little bit more S&C and build it up, and that goes through later in race season. And then I guess the other thing as well is when you look at the process through the different phases as you go through, strength and conditioning doesn't have to be lifting weights and flipping tires, as you say. It could just be making sure you're really stable, buying a wobble board and staying at home and standing on one leg on a wobble board, or a cushion, standing on a cushion and just practicing that, doing it with your eyes shut and building proprioception skills, which will make a difference in terms of conditioning.
Absolutely.
So it could be base level.
Yeah, the smallest changes, and again, like I said about recovery, you know, even if the actual loading is a challenge for you, then, like you say, stand on one leg, do some basic stuff at home, but also understand and look up and ask about recovery. Because if you can't, or you're scared of going into the actual strength and conditioning field, and you've done okay, and at the end of the day, you've got to assess why are you doing triathlon. And if you're loving what you do, should we take that fun away by overfacing you with strength and conditioning? And what I'd say to that is, if you've done well and you're happy, the responsibility it falls to you. But look up recovery, understand how to recover better, which will give you that sort of helping step, because you're still getting condition. It might not be what we want, and you may plateau, you might end up having to see a physio, you might not PB for years, but if you're happy and you're enjoying what you do,
that's the key thing you're going to do.
You've got to scale who you're working with. I mean, some people I would push harder, and some people I just back off. And
I think with that strength and conditioning input as well, I found a lot of times, where does the athlete want to go? Obviously, you look at what they can do and what they're able to do, but if they're sat there saying, it's like I'm just want to do my local race, I can really enjoy it, I'm not really worried about going and doing anything, breaking records or anything, then it's going to be a trip down to the swimming pool, do more swimming, get a bit more time in the different sports, and not worry about it. And then if we can do them, if it's important there as well. Whereas if you've got someone saying, I want to try and do my age group here, or try and qualify for this, then you need to think about making sure that the consistency is there, which comes through strength and conditioning and build strength and power.
I would say, sadly, for me, in my experience, the two things that really make that difference is a good coach, up to speed, that is willing to learn and to develop their own skill, instead of saying, I know everything. Nobody knows everything. There's no such thing as perfection. So I think a good, strong coach that is got you as number one and wants to develop you. And the other thing, sadly, is because it's broken. And it's always that last thing. It's not the end of the day, and we've built people up, and they've gone and done amazing things.
Yeah.
But for me, it's like, it didn't really have to be that way. I'd rather have met you and sort of sold that to you. But should it be something we're trying to sell? I'm not so sure if that's the right terminology. One of the best things is when you actually enter in, or even dabble in the conditioning, strength conditioning, at a low level, you'll still feel some gains. So one of and then once you feel that, you're like, yeah, I'm addicted to this. Then you've got to hold them back and actually stop them from overloading. But one of the best things that I get on a regular basis from all sorts of sport, but triathlon's a good one with the run, swim, cycle. 2 offloading, 1 loading is I'll get emails and text messages or phone call and they go, oh, I've just got to say, what are you going to say? I've PB'd. I haven't PB'd in 10 years. I've PB'd. That's amazing. That is really, really cool. Whether it be seconds, minutes, or huge
hours and
hours. And you're like, that's amazing. They go, yeah. And I'm like, there's a but coming. They go, yeah, but I didn't set out to do it. It just happened. So I was comfortable. And this is where the efficiency is, which we spoke about earlier. That is efficiency. So if you think, if you're doing something, you're at 85%, you think, do you know what, you look at your watch or your Garmin or your data coming back, and you go, oh my lord, I haven't pushed myself. You imagine what you could do if your race strategy was go out PB, go out, track the people down in front of you, and get on that podium. They're already working at 95, 98%, and you're at 8,
I think sometimes it's about that self-belief that the strength and conditioning can work, but a lot of the time it takes a while for people to go. I think an athlete in the gym this year actually, and she was looking at the strength and conditioning thing, just finished that strength phase, which is heavy weight, and she was feeling really rather frustrated with it all. She wasn't seeing those gains. I've done strength work now. I'm not seeing the power coming through in the body. I'm not seeing the speed coming out from the run. And it wasn't until we went to that power conversion bit we started hitting the plyometrics and some of the other side of things, and they suddenly saw that they just were so slow. They just weren't able to convert that strength. And then as soon as we did a couple of weeks of that, we built into that cycle. Suddenly the power came. So it's also giving patience as well.
Absolutely.
Athletes don't really. They need to overload to get the adaptation. To see the adaptation, they have to also be patient to let their body respond.
And just you just hit on something there with the strength thing, not feeling faster or more powerful. Pure strength, if you're talking about a running aspect, does not make you necessarily fast. It could be, it could slow you down, make you feel like you're running through treacle. So what we do, we put this strength in you to deal with the load and mechanics and patterns and everything else, and then you've got to do something with it. You've got to turn it into a power, speed and conversion. In some sports they will combine the two, but to just go and jump around and do hard plyometrics with no strength in, you're opening a can of worms for injury big time. And what have you got to convert? If you're going to break, again, another thing I learned from Gordon over the years is if you're going to break, and this is exciting for us as well, sounds a bit weird, is that conversion from strength to power and speed is a risky time. If you break in that conversion, you have to go back and recycle the strength. So that's where, as trainers, therapists, whatever we want to classify ourselves as, that's when we need to be on our ball and really hands-on and paying attention.
I remember with one of the athletes, great runner, and they went through the strength phase with you, and then you gave them some I think it was some plyometric. Why am I doing that four jumps? But well, hang on a second, just work out the loading that's going on through that, just on those 4 jumps, doing it 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
And you need to back off, and just how careful we have to be as each merge across from pure strength into bounds, jumping, plyometrics, strength, endurance work in the gym, power clean, it's a whole lot. It's just really being careful about the way it's going.
And also keeping in mind what it actually says on the tin for that phase. It is a power speed conversion. Therefore, I deal with this daily, weekly. Is cleaning to a point of fatigue. Okay, or jumping. You know, jumping to a point where you're literally scrambling up onto a block. Yeah, you're getting up on the block, you're jumping off the block. Look at the pace and speed. What are you installing? Now, if let's say you did eight reps of those, and let's be honest, probably 3 of those are really quick and are a true plyometric or a true clean, why are you doing the rest? Because what that rest is negative load.
Yeah.
And you want that. And a plyometric is a simple equation of speed between eccentric to concentric, the time spent between the two, hence why
landing and then pushing off.
Yeah, lengthening. So eccentric is a lengthening state of the tissue under load, and then flicking over, which will be a split second of isometric as it thinks about it, to then into concentric, same load, but then in a shortened position. Then if I go back to the strength phase, people say to me, why are we doing this eccentric loading? That is the control. That is the lengthening aspect. So if we don't have the eccentric, should we say, lengthening, because everybody just focuses on concentric, they let gravity do the eccentric, and then they focus on the big drives, the big screams. Well, guess what? When you come to plyometric and you're asking the body for speed, well, if you're weak in your deficit of eccentric, isometric, and all you are is that recoil to concentric, go figure. Strengthen it up, you've got 3 elements. Strengthen all elements and then focus, get the nervous system awake. A lot of people have what I call a duh moment when they first enter into plyometrics. And again, if you have a duh moment, take it easy. Chill out, go and do something else, focus on something. Don't expect it all to happen. It's quite a technical thing, plyometrics in a power phase.
I think that's where with the athlete from earlier, they suddenly realised quite how much of a duh moment they had, and they could then understand really obviously why they weren't able to. They weren't having that zip. They just felt heavy. They didn't feel good when wearing. They
felt stuck to the floor.
Exactly that. Because they were just like, well, that's why I can't even give myself. Okay, they were doing it, but that's why there was no zip in the run. And sure enough, so, 4 weeks later, bang, straight in again, and there was PBs left, right, and centre.
And then we put that in. And then we put that into the technical. One thing I'll say about strength and conditioning, not so much in tri, because they don't really focus, in my experience, on what we call massive heavyweight. So we talk about strength. Strength is relevant to the individual and the sport. What I can squat or bench is totally different to yourself and everyone else. It has to be very individual. But I've got a thing at the moment where, and again, through my mentoring with other keen specialists or strength and conditioning or coaches, my thing is, okay, you're in a gym environment, you're applying load, and what really irritates me is the load that they're lifting in a strength phase or a clean phase, a power phase. They love numbers. They love IPB. I can squat this. I can squat that. Unless you're into weightlifting as your comp or powerlifting as your comp or even a CrossFit thing, that's not your sport. So the hardest thing is, how do we take load putting in and numbers and actually start to put that, so sprinters are a prime one, how do you put that into out of the gym onto a track and running fast? Or again, you could put it into distance running, and so what I say to the guys is, okay, that's great, but don't get obsessed, because you can squat 200 kg but you can't break 11 seconds. So what's the purpose? And yet you've got a guy that can do 130 but absolutely annihilate you. So what you've got to do is we put the goods in, but then through a certain phase of getting closer to definitely your big races, we have to take it and put it into your environment, and that comes down to coaches as well. And that's where the likes of me and you would work closely, because then it comes down to hands-on, going back to physio and treating pain or treating for performance. That's where that really has to come in, because we can put the strength in, but we don't. It's like having a bunch of keys. They're not tagged or labelled. There's a keyhole. If you put it in and get it right, you're going to win a race, and you're going to be able to tap into all that strength. The chances of that's just fluke. What we need to do, by what I mean by fine tuning, is label those keys. So you can go, there's the key, that's the strength key, bang, there's the door. Does that make sense?
Kind of. I guess it's about delivering that strength or power at the right time, and knowing how to turn it on.
Because you've got to get out of the gym at some point.
Well, true, yeah.
You've got to get out of the gym, and it's not about PBs. It's about it's about storing it and being able to tap into it. If you can't tap into it, what are you doing? So
what you're amazing, really helpful so far. We're going to ask there's a few questions coming through, and there's one which is pretty recent, contentious one. If I know where this is kind of going, and that is that there's definitely a school of thought out there that strength conditioning doesn't really exist because you can get it through training. So you can get your strength work through overgearing on a bike. You can get your strength work through hill repeats in the run, or using paddles in the gym and adding drag and everything else. So why bother with the strength and conditioning?
I mean, there are. I mean, you're absolutely right. There's lots of papers. There's lots of thought processes. Lots of different systems out there. What I would say, I wouldn't say there's one thing for everything. And really, from our point of view, you could say, right, well, I could go for a run and run up a hill to add strength. But from a mechanical point of view, let's take performance out. Remember, if you're injured or you've got a niggle, you're not performing, so you're not going to run up a hill. So how do we, if we're trying to change something, we have to change you before you go up the hill. So we're trying to change your pattern, your habits, your compensations. How do you do that with a hill rep? You can't. You're not changing the environment. So first off, if we talk about strength and conditioning, the strength phase, yes, I agree. There's lots of ways, and it's whatever works for you works for you. But from and this is now I put my injury head on and my sort of rehab head, you've got to be pain-free and have a good system, a good skeleton to run up the hill or to add a paddle. And if technically, you can add a paddle, but you're technically not there, or the firing pan's not there, how do you change that?
So might be as a coach is a sort of frame of mind. Those things we're talking about are specificity. Those are specific movement patterns that you're doing. So if you haven't got a good movement pattern already, you're just adding more load that's going to reinforce the bad movement pattern, so that glass ceiling is always going to be there.
Absolutely.
If you've got good technique, then those things are great strength works, and they're really useful. And if you don't, then using the strength and conditioning to build up that strength work, movement pattern, improve that, you can then...
Absolutely. And I think the key thing here is also, I'm not, to be honest, look at the size of me, I'm not a massive fan of purely just gyms and big lifts. I love movement. I love function. It probably goes back to the horse. It's freedom of movement. And I think, like I've said to a lot of big, strength and conditioning coaches, I focus on the big lifts. And it's all about the steel, and chains here and chains there. And if I said, right, there's a deadlift, there's a squat, front, back, whatever. There's a bench press, there's a row, push-pull days, whatever. On paper, would you say this is a strong program? And they all go, yeah. Not 1 ounce of functionality in there. And what are we trying to install is function, but at the same time, it's about taking a bit from here, and there's a time and a place to do it, and to support the technical. If you can get the technical thing and you're fine and improve, then fine. That's fine. Just focus on just soft tissue. Focus on a really good physio, somebody that can put their hands on you and guide you to where you need to be. And hill reps fine. Parachute, whatever it may be. There's lots of ways of getting load and adaptation. What I'm saying is, if you can't change your pattern and compensation, then we need to look at another tool, basically. That's all it is. It is a tool.
Another question which came through, I'll read it out. So going into the winter block now, looking at strength and conditioning in the off-season, triathlon off-season anyway, what level of balance would you expect to have over triathlon disciplines? i.e., would it be 50% strength and 50% triathlon, or would it be just more swim or bike?
Right now?
Going into that off-season block. So if they're in that off-season, how would that look?
So
I guess the follow-up question is, then how would that change?
Okay, so it goes back to that training scale I was talking about. So, sport, I believe, should be 12 months of the year. Some people do, they cycle all year, they run all year. I think your body needs to come down, that's why there's an off-season or pre-season, whatever you want to classify it as. But for me, because of the assessment, because of trying to make some changes, remember, if you run, swim, cycle, and we're trying to make changes, how do we make the change? Because every time you run, swim, cycle, you're installing the bad pattern. So there has to come a time where, and it could be 3 weeks. I mean, you know, you're probably looking at 6 to 9 weeks to change a movement pattern. So to change the pattern and to start to install a foundation, I believe that the gym aspect should be the leader. So again, here we are with a training scale, and you're technical, but athletes hate that. They love to run. You've got to train to run. Running does not make you just a great runner. And the same with everything else. So, you know, it's not forever. It is a cycle, and then it will go 50-50, and then it will flick. So again, it's really based, if you're going through winter, to answer that, you need more specifics of dates, because you have to be more specific. Sometimes you need more, sometimes you need less. Depends on the individual, depends on the experience of the individual as well, what they've done before.
I think as a coach, to answer that question from a coaching point of view, I think also, yes, you can go and slog out lots of miles on the bike and go and do long runs and cross country and everything else, but actually you're doing that throughout the 12 months of the year or the rest of the time, and it's not going to really be great weather. So instead of worrying about trying to head out on the bike and do more things, you've got some great indoor trainer stuff, head to the gym. Maybe put in 2 or 3 gym sessions, put a bit of an emphasis because it's going to change things up a bit when you come into the rubbish weather season, and then go outside when it's nice.
I mean, I think you mentioned earlier, but you know, and you definitely would have seen us working this way, where we have runners and definitely Ironmen where we've gone, whoa, stop running. Yeah. We've actually held you back, and that's not off season. That is in the season. That is you know, something's not right, and if we don't take control of you and start to change you, but again, it comes back to the change. If you want us to change you and you want to progress, listen to what we've got to do. And sometimes we need to offload you, and that could be no running whatsoever, because it's low. No running whatsoever, and then we merge you back in. But when you start to come back in, you're coming back in a totally different, not body, but it's skeletal system. Yeah, movement pattern and strength. And you know, when the coach says, "Oh, I need more of this from you," tall and driving instead of sort of collapsing and coming into this sort of compressed state, which doesn't install efficiency. The only way we can install that is by having that time off.
I think one of the athletes got on the moment, we've deliberately said we need to decondition, because everything's going to be so tight from training, great race season and really well, huge gains, but you need that value to rebuild back up again to peak the following year. I think it's something.
Yeah, it's just reassessing constantly. Another key thing that people have asked me over the years, certainly people that I've worked with in rugby or football, or Premiership, individual cases this is, not actually with teams as a whole, which is a bit bizarre when you think, well, you know, you've got a Premiership team which have millions in medical support and performance. And I said to this one guy, "What are you doing here?" And he goes, "Well, we've got all this money, we've got all this facility, but it doesn't mean it's any good. Otherwise I wouldn't be here." So the logic kicks in. Yeah. And people say to me, "Oh my God, you're working with such and such." And they go, yeah. And they go, "What sort of stuff are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, you know, he's pre-season. He's going to go into his pre-season with the team as a squad. They're going to go away, do this, do that. And he wants to rise above. He wants to be better than he has been. He wants to get noticed." And they go, "What football drills have you done with him?" And I'm like, "Nothing." And they go, "What do you mean? He's a footballer. Come on, what football drills?" I go, "Well, the only round thing that he's actually touched is a slam ball. He's got the whole season to kick a football. You have the whole season to run. You have the whole season to swim, cycle. But I do appreciate you do need to get into condition. But you want to get into condition and not waste energy, not increase the risk of overload and injury, because you're worth nothing to anyone. So it's about balance. And I would say, just think about sometimes a little less is more."
And then one of the questions as well was, what would be the speed work? I'm sort of paraphrasing here, put this into context. Speed work and the plyometric conversion, that makes sense and it's quite straightforward. But when we're talking about strength, trying to generate that strength, are there any targets or ideas that endurance athletes you kind of want to see them going towards? Is there a split male female as well?
Yeah, I mean, you would definitely look at the split between male and female, obviously, obvious reasons. But I think it comes down to the individual. It comes down to basically what they've gone through, what their system's like as well. Sometimes, as much as we would love to put you through a power conversion on paper, this is where you should be. Sometimes you know, we have to hold you back, or sometimes we have to push the system harder and challenge it. As far as targets go, you know, I wouldn't say there shouldn't be a set thing, because you've got 3 disciplines that you're looking at. I think really, if you can get the load sorted and the functionality sorted, then everything should start to sort of come together. And that's not sort of steering away from the question, because it is quite a difficult one to target. There's so many factors in place.
It's important to working with someone to get it right.
Yeah, I think so. And again, with that, looking back at the individual, the more information you get, the better. And you become otherwise it just becomes a generic. So I don't think there should be a generic answer for a sport, a phase. It's something that I sort of try to steer away from. Really.
Well, I think we're going to pretty much finish there. I guess any kind of key takeaways that you want to give to the guys and girls in terms of anything they need to think about taking away?
Yeah, my key thing is do the basics really well. Do the basics really well. Enjoy what you do, and every now and then just stop and say to yourself, why? Why am I doing this? Why am I busting a gut and I'm not getting anything back? If you just say why, it just puts a full stop, makes you think, reevaluates what you're trying to do, where you want to go. And sometimes just by asking why, it actually, you know, opens your eyes a bit. And there's not one thing. Yeah, there's lots of things out there. It's an accumulation of multiple means of load, but I would keep it basic. Tick the boxes and enjoy.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Paul. Appreciate that. And I think we'll try and get you back on again at some point. Thank you, everybody. And I guess hopefully we see Paul later. If you've got any more questions, do just ping them down on Facebook, and we're very happy to answer them, or we can pass them on to Paul or anyone at Bosworth Clinic to help you out there. But thank you very much. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.